The surveillance footage would later show Garrett Stone ripping the varsity jacket clean off Skylar Wells's shoulders at exactly 11:43 a.m. But it couldn't capture the sound of her father's Purple Heart medal hitting the linoleum floor in front of 200 students packed into Lincoln High's main hallway. The new cheerleader from the wrong side of Cedar Rapids was about to deliver a lesson in respect that would leave the quarterback unconscious for 90 seconds. What Garrett didn't know was that beneath her pom-poms and perfect smile, Skylar had spent 12 years training in Muay Thai today. She was done pretending to be weak. The trouble started 3 weeks earlier. On a humid September morning when Skylar Wells first walked through Lincoln High School's polished glass doors, at 5'4" with strawberry blonde hair pulled into a regulation cheerleading ponytail, she looked like any other varsity athlete except for the faded military jacket draped over her uniform. While other girls sported designer windbreakers and Letterman jackets borrowed from boyfriends, Skylar wore her late father's Desert Storm service jacket like armor. Its olive drab fabric worn soft from years of use. Fresh meat, Dylan Cross muttered to his teammates as they watched her navigate the crowded hallway. As Lincoln High's starting linebacker and Garrett Stone's right hand, Dylan had a nose for vulnerability. Check out Salvation Army Barbie. Garrett Stone turned from his locker. All 6'3" of quarterback perfection, pivoting with practiced ease. His father owned Stone Development, the company that had gentrified half of Cedar Rapids, and Garrett wore his privilege, like cologne, expensive and impossible to ignore. His eyes tracked Skylar's movement with the calculating gaze of a predator spotting wounded prey. Wells? He read from the roster sheet Dylan handed him. Skylar Wells. Transfer from Jefferson High. Made varsity cheer on scholarship. Scholarship? Jared King, the team's wide receiver, laughed. Since when does cheer give scholarships? Since Coach Madison needed to fill Jessica's spot after her dad's promotion moved them to Chicago, Dylan explained. Apparently this one can do aerials and shit. Coach saw her at summer camp. Garrett's lips curved into the smile that had charmed teachers. Intimidated freshmen, and masked 3 years of systematic cruelty, aerial abilities won't help her here. This is Lincoln territory. We have standards. Those standards, as Skylar would quickly learn, were less about school spirit and more about social hierarchy. Lincoln High operated on an unspoken caste system where your parents' tax bracket determined your place in the food chain. Athletes ruled, but only the right kind, the ones whose families donated to booster clubs and whose names appeared on buildings. Scholarship kids, transfers, and anyone who couldn't afford the unofficial uniform of wealth were targets for those who'd been raised to believe their money made them untouchable. Skylar had noticed the stares her first day, felt the weight of judgment as she walked the halls in her father's jacket. She'd grown up in Jefferson District, where her mom worked double shifts as an ER nurse at Mercy Hospital, scraping together rent for their 2-bedroom apartment. The jacket wasn't just clothing, it was all she had left of Staff Sergeant Marcus Wells, who'd come home from Iraq when she was 5, only to lose his battle with PTSD 2 years later. She'd started Muay Thai at 7, her mom hoping the discipline would help channel her grief. What neither of them expected was that Skylar would turn out to be a prodigy. By 17, she held 3 state championships and had trained with former UFC fighters who used the gym her instructor owned. But when the cheerleading scholarship to Lincoln High offered a chance at a better education and maybe a college scholarship down the line, Skylar had made a choice. She locked away the fighter and became just another cheerleader, trading knee strikes for high kicks, hiding her calloused knuckles under spirit gloves. The first test came during morning practice. 1 week into the semester, Skylar had arrived early, using the empty gym to run through her tumbling passes. She didn't notice Garrett and his crew until their shadows fell across the mat. Impressive, Garrett said, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescension, masked as compliment. Where'd you learn moves like that? YouTube? Skylar straightened, automatically adjusting her jacket where it hung on the bleachers. Summer camp. Coach Madison recruited me. Right. The scholarship. Dylan stepped closer, his bulk intentionally intimidating. Must be nice getting handouts. It's not a handout, Skylar said quietly. I earned my spot. Earned? Jared laughed. Your mom probably filled out some poverty form, told some sob story. And Madison felt bad. That's not earning, that's charity. Heat crawled up Skylar's neck, but she kept her breathing steady the way Master Chen had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Control the breath. Control the mind. Control the mind. Control the body. Look at her. Garrett circled slowly, like a shark sensing blood. She's even wearing military surplus. What is that? Your dad's? Let me guess she's deployed somewhere. And you're playing the sympathy card? My father's dead. The words came out flat, emotionless. But something in her tone made Dylan step back. Garrett, however, pressed forward. Dead hero dad. Even better for scholarship applications. He reached toward the jacket on the bleachers. Probably smells like thrift store. Skylar's hand shot out, catching his wrist inches from the fabric. For a moment, their eyes met, and Garrett saw something that made his smirk falter. Then she released him, stepping back. Don't touch the jacket. Or what? Garrett rubbed his wrist, pride stinging more than skin. You'll tell Coach Madison? She can't protect you? Scholarship girl. My dad's company sponsors the entire athletic program. One phone call, and your free ride disappears. The threat hung in the air like a challenge. Skylar could have responded, could have mentioned that she'd already been accepted to 3 universities based on her academic record alone, that the cheerleading scholarship was just to help her mom with expenses. Instead, she gathered her things and left, leaving the 3 boys to their empty victory. But Garrett Stone wasn't satisfied with submission. He'd built his reputation on breaking people who didn't belong, and Skylar's quiet defiance rankled like a splinter under his skin. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated with calculated precision. It started small. Her practice uniform mysteriously relocated to the pool during Tuesday's assembly, forcing her to perform in borrowed clothes that didn't fit. Then came the social media campaign. Anonymous posts questioning how a welfare case made varsity over deserving candidates. Dylan would accidentally bump into her in hallways, his 220 pounds of muscle sending her sprawling. Jared specialized in verbal jabs during classes they shared, always quiet enough that teachers couldn't hear, but loud enough for classmates to snicker. Through it all, Skylar maintained her composure with zen-like discipline. She retrieved her uniform without complaint, ignored the posts, picked herself up from Dylan's shoves, and let Jared's words roll off like water. Her teammates began to notice and respect her resilience. Ashley Chen, the squad's co-captain, started walking with her between classes. Other girls began sitting with her at lunch, drawn by her quiet strength. How do you do it? Ashley asked one afternoon as they stretched before practice. How do you not react when they're such assholes? Skylar considered her words carefully. My dad used to say that bullies feed on reaction, starve them of it, and they'll escalate until they expose themselves. Your dad sounds smart. He was. Skylar touched the jacket folded beside her. He came back from war with medals for bravery. But he said the bravest thing he ever did was walk away from fights he could have won. What she didn't say was that walking away was getting harder each day. The fighter inside her, the one who'd spent 12 years perfecting the 8 limbs of Muay Thai, was rattling her cage. Every shove from Dylan made her visualize the sweep that would put him on his back. Every sneer from Garrett had her calculating the distance for a teep kick that would fold him in half. But she held back, honoring her father's memory and her mother's sacrifice. The breaking point came on a Thursday that started like any other. October had arrived with unusual warmth, making the hallways of Lincoln High feel more claustrophobic than usual. Skylar had stayed late Wednesday night, helping her mom with household bills, trying to figure out how to stretch $1,100 to cover $1,500 in expenses. She'd fallen asleep at the kitchen table, woke at 5 a.m., and barely made it to school on time. Her father's jacket felt heavier that morning, weighted with more than memory. Inside the inner pocket, wrapped in plastic, was his Purple Heart, the one thing of value they hadn't sold during the lean years. She carried it on days when she needed strength, when the distance between who she was and who she pretended to be felt too vast to bridge. The confrontation began during third period. Skylar had AP history with Mr. Davidson, one of the few teachers who judged students by their work rather than their parents' bank accounts. She was presenting her project on income inequality in America when Garrett, who'd managed to buy his way into AP classes despite mediocre grades, decided to provide commentary. Fascinating perspective, he drawled from the back row. Really gives insight into the mind of someone who thinks success is unfair just because they can't achieve it. Mr. Stone, Davidson warned, but Garrett was already standing. I mean, it's convenient, right? Blame the system instead of admitting some people just work harder. My dad started with nothing and built an empire. Maybe if welfare queens spent less time complaining. Your dad started with a $5 million loan from your grandfather. Skylar's voice cut through his speech like a blade. That's not nothing. That's more than most families see in a lifetime. The class went silent. Evan Davidson looked shocked. In 3 weeks, Skylar had never directly challenged Garrett's narrative. Careful. Scholarship. Garrett's voice dropped to a dangerous register. You're forgetting your place. My place? Skylar turned fully to face him. My place is in this classroom because I earned a 4.0 GPA. My place is on varsity because I can throw a back handspring full twist that you couldn't do if your trust fund depended on it. What exactly is your place, Garrett? Besides standing on third base pretending you hit a triple? Dylan and Jared shifted in their seats, ready to back their quarterback. But Davidson intervened. That's enough. Both of you. Mr. Stone. Sight down. Miss Wells. Continue your presentation. Skylar turned back to her slides. But she could feel Garrett's rage radiating from the back of the room. She'd broken the cardinal rule of Lincoln Highs. She'd embarrassed someone who mattered in front of people who didn't. There would be consequences. They came sooner than expected. The lunch period at Lincoln High was divided into 2 45-minute shifts to accommodate the school's 2,400 students. Skylar had second lunch, which meant navigating halls packed with students heading to and from the cafeteria. She'd learned to move quickly during the transition, keeping her head down and staying close to the walls. But today, Garrett had positioned his crew strategically. Dylan blocked the main hallway intersection, forcing foot traffic into a bottleneck. Jared stood at the alternate route, funneling students toward the confrontation, and Garrett himself waited in the center of the main hall, surrounded by spectators who sensed drama brewing. Skylar saw the trap immediately. 3 years of competitive fighting had taught her to read positioning, to recognize when opponents were coordinating movements. She could turn back, take the long way around through the science wing. But that would mean missing lunch and showing fear. She adjusted her father's jacket and walked forward. There she is, Garrett announced, his voice carrying over the hallway noise. Cedar Rapids' newest charity case. Wearing her food stamp fashion, the crowd parted, creating an arena. Students pulled out phones with practiced efficiency, the modern Coliseum demanding digital documentation. Skylar kept walking, eyes fixed on the space past Garrett's shoulder. I'm talking to you, welfare queen. He stepped directly into her path. That was quite a show in Davidson's class. Feeling proud of yourself? I need to get to lunch. Skylar's voice stayed level, but her hands had unconsciously shifted position, weight transferring to the balls of her feet. Lunch? Dylan had moved closer, completing the triangle formation. What's on the menu today, government cheese? Step aside. Garrett. Or what? He leaned in, his 6'3" frame towering over her. You'll cry to Davidson, to Madison? Nobody can protect you here. This is our house. Last warning? The words came out differently, carrying an edge that made nearby students step back. Move. Garrett laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. Warning? You're warning me? He turned to address the growing crowd. You hear that? Scholarship Barbie thinks she can threaten. His words cut off as Skylar tried to step around him. He grabbed her shoulder, spinning her back. And that's when everything changed. The contact triggered something primal, not just in Skylar, but in the crowd. This wasn't verbal sparring anymore. This was physical. And everyone knew the rules were different now. Don't touch me. Skylar's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried in the sudden silence. Touch you? Garrett's hand tightened on her shoulder. What's wrong? Can't handle a little contact? Maybe you shouldn't have run your mouth. She rolled her shoulder, a simple movement that broke his grip and created distance. To untrained eyes, it looked like she'd just shrugged him off. To anyone who understood body mechanics, it was a textbook defensive displacement. Bitch. The word exploded from Garrett as he reached for her again, this time with both hands aiming for her jacket. You need to learn respect. Time slowed to syrup. Skylar saw his hands coming, recognized the intent to grab and humiliate, and made a decision not to be a victim. Not to honor the social contract that said she should accept abuse because of who his father was. Not to betray everything her father had fought for, including the right to stand with dignity. But Garrett's hands were already in motion, and 200 students were watching, recording, waiting to see if David would face Goliath or if money would win again like it always did at Lincoln High. The jacket came off with a sound like tearing paper. Garrett's hands wrenching the fabric from Skylar's shoulders with enough force to pop the 40-year-old seams, but it wasn't the ripping that made the crowd gasp, it was the metallic ping of something hitting the floor. The Purple Heart medal bounced once, twice, then spun to a stop at Dylan's feet. Its bronze surface caught the fluorescent lights, the profile of George Washington staring up at 200 suddenly silent students. Everyone knew what it was. Even those who'd never seen one recognized the distinctive shape, the purple ribbon, the weight of what it represented. "Is that—" Jared started, then stopped, his usual sneer faltering. Skylar stood frozen, her eyes locked on the medal. Without the jacket, she looked smaller, more vulnerable in just her cheerleading practice shirt, but something was happening to her stance. A fundamental shift that started in her feet and rippled upward. Her weight transferred to her back leg, her hands came up, not in fists, but in an open guard position that looked almost casual to the untrained eye. Garrett, still holding the torn jacket, hadn't noticed the change. He was riding the high of his victory, playing to the cameras. "Look at this piece of shit," he said, holding up the jacket. "Probably got it from some surplus store. Bet the medal's fake too." His foot moved toward the Purple Heart, and that's when 12 years of training took over. The roundhouse kick started from the ground up, a perfect kinetic chain beginning with the pivot of her standing foot. Skylar's hip turned over, her leg whipping around in an arc that would have scored a perfect 10 in any tournament. The blade of her foot caught Garrett exactly where she intended, just below his ear at the junction of jaw and neck. Not hard enough to cause permanent damage. Esh could have driven through his skull if she'd wanted, but with sufficient force to activate every neurological shutdown switch in that region. Garrett Stone, 210 pounds of quarterback muscle, lifted off his feet. The jacket flew from his hands as his body went horizontal, rotating in the air like a physics demonstration of angular momentum. He hit the linoleum hard, the sound echoing through the hallway like a dropped textbook multiplied by 10. Then silence. Perfect, absolute silence, as 200 students tried to process what they'd just witnessed. The new cheerleader, the charity case, the scholarship girl, who took their abuse for 3 weeks, had just dropped Lincoln High's golden boy with a single strike. Skylar held her position for a heartbeat, then slowly lowered her leg. She walked to where her father's medal lay, picked it up with reverent hands, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she retrieved the jacket, examining the torn seams with the detached focus of someone cataloging evidence. "He's not breathing," someone whispered. And suddenly the spell broke. Students surged forward, some to check on Garrett, others backing away as if Skylar might explode again. Dylan and Jared stood frozen, their usual swagger evaporated. Ashley Chen pushed through the crowd, her phone already dialing 911. "Everyone back up," Principal Roberts' voice boomed as he shouldered through the mob, followed by the school resource officer. His eyes took in the scene: Garrett unconscious on the floor, Skylar standing with her torn jacket, hundreds of phones recording. "What happened here?" "She attacked him," Dylan found his voice, pointing at Skylar. "Out of nowhere. Garrett was just talking and he ripped my jacket off." Skylar's voice cut through his protests, calm and clear. "He put his hands on me, tore my father's military jacket from my body, and attempted to desecrate his Purple Heart medal. I defended myself with reasonable force." "Reasonable force?" Jared sputtered. "You knocked him out. 1 strike, no permanent damage. Textbook self-defense." She met Principal Roberts' eyes. "And I have 200 witnesses, plus video evidence that he initiated physical contact." The principal's face cycled through several expressions as the implications hit him. This wasn't just a fight, this was the school's star quarterback assaulting a female student, a military family member. On camera. The scandal would be nuclear. Paramedics arrived, checking Garrett's vitals. He was breathing, had been the whole time, despite the crowd's panic, but clearly concussed. As they loaded him onto a gurney, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. What happened? "You learned a lesson?" Skylar said quietly, but her words carried in the hushed hallway. "My father died serving this country. This jacket survived Iraq. Survived his battle with PTSD. Survived 7 years of my mom and me barely making ends meet. And you thought you had the right to tear it off me because your daddy has money?" She looked around the crowd, meeting the eyes of students who'd watched her humiliation for weeks. "I'm done being anyone's charity case. I'm done pretending to be weak so you feel strong. My name is Skylar Wells. My father was Staff Sergeant Marcus Wells, awarded the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. My mother works 18-hour shifts to keep us afloat, and I've been hiding who I am to fit into your world. The resource officer stepped forward. Miss Wells, I need you to come with me. I know. She folded the torn jacket carefully, cradling it like a wounded animal. Ashley, tell Coach Madison I'll miss practice. As she walked away, flanked by the principal and officer, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. But something had fundamentally changed in the social dynamics of Lincoln High. The untouchable had been touched. The golden boy had been laid low, and the scholarship girl they'd dismissed as weak had revealed herself as something else entirely. In the principal's office, as statements were taken and parents were called, the video had already gone viral. Number jacket justice began trending. Military families shared outrage over the Purple Heart disrespect. Martial arts enthusiasts analyzed the perfect form of Skylar's kick. And somewhere in Cedar Rapids, a phone rang in the office of Stone Development. The principal's office at Lincoln High hadn't seen this much tension since the chemistry lab explosion of 2018. Skylar sat in the leather chair across from Principal Roberts' desk, her torn jacket folded in her lap. While the sounds of barely controlled chaos filtered through the closed door, the resource officer, Deputy Chen, stood by the window, speaking quietly into his radio. Through the glass, Skylar could see news vans already pulling into the parking lot. Miss Wells, Principal Roberts began, then stopped, running his hand over his balding head. At 53, he dealt with fights, drugs, and scandals, but nothing quite like this. The video has been viewed over 200,000 times in the past hour. I'm aware. Skylar's voice remained steady, though her fingers traced the torn seam of her father's jacket. Garrett Stone is at Cedar Rapids General with a grade 2 concussion. His father is, Roberts paused, choosing his words carefully, extremely upset. His son assaulted me. I defended myself. You knocked him unconscious with a martial arts kick. One kick, after he physically grabbed me, tore my clothing, and attempted to destroy my father's Purple Heart. She met his eyes directly. Would you prefer I had let him continue? Maybe waited until he'd done worse? Deputy Chen turned from the window. For what it's worth, I've reviewed multiple angles of footage. Clear self-defense. The Stone boy initiated physical contact, used excessive force in removing your jacket, and you responded with a single defensive strike. Textbook reasonable force. Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and paled. Richard Stone is here? The door burst open before anyone could respond. Richard Stone filled the doorframe, 6'5" of aggressive wealth in a $3,000 suit. His face was the color of expensive burgundy, and his eyes fixed on Skylar with laser focus. You little bitch, he snarled, taking a step forward before Deputy Chen intercepted him. Sir, I need you to step back. Step back? Richard's voice boomed. This trash attacked my son. She could have killed him. Mr. Stone. Roberts stood, trying to regain control. Please, let's discuss this calmly. Calmly? My boy is in the hospital because this welfare case couldn't handle a little teasing. I want her arrested. I want her expelled. I want her family sued into oblivion. Your son assaulted me first, Skylar said quietly. It's on video. Richard turned his fury on her. You think that matters? You think your little viral moment means anything? I own half this city. My lawyers will destroy you. Your mother will lose her job. You'll lose that precious scholarship. I'll make sure you never. Mr. Stone. A new voice cut through his tirade. Catherine Park, the school district superintendent, stood in the doorway with her tablet in hand. I think you should see this before making any more threats. She turned the tablet around. On the screen was a CNN headline, High School Quarterback Assaults Gold Star Daughter. Receives instant justice. The Department of Defense has already issued a statement condemning the disrespect shown to Staff Sergeant Wells' Purple Heart. Park continued. The governor's office called asking for details. And Mr. Stone, your son is currently the most hated person on military Twitter. They're calling for boycotts of Stone Development. Richard's face went from burgundy to ash. They can't. They can and they are. Park's voice was ice. Lincoln High has a zero-tolerance policy for assault. Your son violated that policy. The fact that his victim defended herself proportionally and expertly doesn't change his actions. She knocked him out. After he assaulted her, Deputy Chen stepped forward. Mr. Stone, I've been doing this for 15 years. Your son committed simple assault. Possibly battery. Miss. Wells used legal self-defense. If anyone's getting arrested here, it won't be her. Skylar's phone buzzed. Her mother. She declined the call. She'd explain everything later. This isn't over. Richard hissed. But the threat lacked his earlier venom. My lawyers will advise you to drop this unless you want your son charged with assault. A woman's voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a small Asian woman in a sharp business suit. Janet Wu. Attorney. I'll be representing Miss Wells pro bono. You can't just... Richard started. I can, and I am. Wu stepped into the room, handing Skylar a business card. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan. What your son did to that Purple Heart, to that jacket, there are about 10 million veterans who take that personally, myself included. Richard Stone looked around the room at the superintendent checking her tablet as more news alerts came in, at the deputy whose hand rested casually on his service weapon, at the lawyer who radiated quiet menace, and finally at Skylar, who sat calmly in the eye of the storm. My son need consequences, not criminal charges, he said finally. His voice deflated. He's 18. This could ruin his future. His actions ruined his future. Skylar spoke for the first time since Wu arrived. I just revealed who he really was. Meanwhile, Lincoln High's hallways had become a battleground of a different sort. The video spread like digital wildfire, reaching every phone in school within minutes. Students who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. Remember when Garrett dumped Tyler Morrison in the dumpster for wearing knockoff Jordans? Someone posted. He pantsed me freshman year because my dad drives a Honda. Another added, called my mom the help when she came for parent night. She's a cardiac surgeon. The stories poured out 3 years of systematic bullying, harassment, and cruelty, all protected by wealth and athletic privilege. The hashtag number Lincoln Reckoning began trending locally. Then nationally, in the cafeteria, Dylan Cross and Jared King sat at their usual table, but the kingdom had fallen. Students who normally scrambled to sit near them now gave them wide berth. Ashley, Chen, and the cheerleading squad occupied the power vacuum, their table, suddenly the center of social gravity. She really trained for 12 years? Megan Howard asked Ashley, still processing what they'd witnessed. Muay Thai? She showed me videos from her competitions. Ashley scrolled through her phone. Look at this, she won state 3 times. Beat girls twice her size. Why didn't she tell anyone? Because she wanted to be normal, wanted to be judged for who she is, not what she could do. Ashley looked around the cafeteria. How messed up is it that she had to hide being strong to fit in? At another table, a group of freshman boys watched the video for the 20th time. Slow motion analyzing the kick. The hip rotation is perfect. One said, see how she pivots on the standing leg? My dad said she could have killed him if she wanted. That was restraint. Restraint? She knocked him out? Nah. Man, a real roundhouse to the temple. He'd be in the morgue, not the hospital. The perspective shift was seismic. Skylar Wells wasn't the scholarship charity case. Annie Moresh was the warrior who'd hidden among them, the protector who'd chosen peace until forced to fight. Back in the office, negotiations had moved past threats to damage control. Richard Stone sat deflated in a chair, his phone buzzing constantly with calls he didn't answer. The family business was hemorrhaging support as number boycott Stone gained traction. What do you want? He asked finally, looking at Skylar. Money? An apology? I want your son to understand what he did wrong. Skylar replied, not just to me, but to everyone he's hurt. And I want this school to change. Superintendent Park leaned forward. What changes? Real anti-bullying policies with teeth. No more protecting athletes or wealthy students. Anonymous reporting systems. Mandatory sensitivity training. Skylar's voice gained strength. And a memorial scholarship for military families, funded by families who've benefited from favoritism. That's extortion. Richard started, then stopped, as Wu cleared her throat. That's justice. The lawyer corrected. Your alternative is criminal charges, civilsuit, and continued public relations. Nightmare. Your choice. Skylar's phone buzzed again. This time she answered, recognizing the number. Skylar? Her mother's voice was tight with worry. I'm seeing things online. Are you okay? They said there was a fight. I'm okay. Mom, I'm in the principal's office. Can you come? I'm already in the parking lot. 2 minutes later, Diane Wells burst through the door. At 41, She looked older double shifts, and single parenthood had left their marks. But her eyes, the same green as Skylar's, blazed with protective fury. "Where is he?" she demanded. Then spotted Richard Stone. "You? Your son put his hands on my daughter?" "Mrs. Wells." Roberts tried to intercede, but Diane wasn't having it. "No. I want to hear him say it." She turned to Richard. "Your boy tore Marcus's jacket? Touched his Purple Heart?" Richard couldn't meet her eyes. "There was an altercation. An assault." "Say it." Diane's voice cracked. "That jacket survived Fallujah. It survived my husband's 3 tours. It survived his fight with PTSD and was the only thing of his Sky wanted when we cleaned out his things. And your entitled brat tore it off her, Mom?" Skylar stood, putting a hand on her mother's arm. "It's okay. We're handling it." Diane pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, then examined the torn jacket. "We can fix this, Mrs. Kim at the alterations shop. She does invisible mending. I'll pay for it," Richard said quickly. "You'll pay for a lot more than that." Wu interjected, "But let's discuss terms." The next 3 hours were a blur of negotiations, statements, and careful legal maneuvering. By 4 p.m., an agreement was reached. Garrett would withdraw from Lincoln High immediately, finishing his senior year at a private school. He'd undergo mandatory counseling and perform 300 hours of community service at the VA hospital. The Stone family would fund a $50,000 annual scholarship for military families and donate another $100,000 to Lincoln's anti-bullying programs. In exchange, Skylar wouldn't press criminal charges. "And the jacket?" Skylar asked. "Professional restoration. Paid for by the Stones." Wu confirmed, plus a written apology from Garrett, delivered publicly. As they finalized details, Skylar's phone exploded with notifications. The video had gone beyond viral. It was a phenomenon. Marines shared it with Respect the Heart. Female fighters posted support with Warrior in disguise. Even celebrities weighed in, praising her restraint and technique, but it was a text from Ashley that made her smile. "Practice is optional today, but the whole squad wants to learn self-defense. You in?" That evening, Skylar sat on her bed, her father's jacket laid carefully beside her. The medal was back in her pocket, a comfortable weight against her hip. Her laptop showed dozens of interview requests. Good Morning America, ESPN. Even international outlets wanted her story. "Sky?" Her mom knocked, then entered with 2 cups of tea. "How are you doing?" "I don't know," Skylar admitted. "I spent so long hiding, trying to fit in. Now everyone knows." "What your dad would say?" Skylar smiled sadly. "That sometimes we have to fight to protect what matters, but only as a last resort. You gave that boy every chance to stop. He chose violence." Diane sat beside her daughter. "Your father would be proud. Not of the kick of the restraint. Another fighter might have really hurt him." "I wanted to," Skylar confessed. "When he grabbed the jacket, when I heard it tear, I saw red. But you didn't. You controlled it. Used just enough force to stop the threat. That's what all those years of training were for, not to hurt people, but to know how much is enough." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea. Outside, news vans still lined their street, waiting for a statement Skylar wasn't ready to give. "I'm switching shifts," Diane said suddenly. "Days only. No more doubles." "Mom? We need the money. We need each other more. Besides," Diane smiled, "something tells me those scholarship offers are about to get more competitive. Every college with a martial arts program is going to want you now." Monday morning arrived with the weight of anticipation. Skylar pulled into Lincoln High's parking lot to find it transformed. News vans occupied the visitor spaces, parents clustered in groups, some supportive, others clearly uncomfortable. But it was the students that surprised her most. A group of freshman girls approached as she exited her car. "Miss Wells, we wanted to say thank you. What you did, it gave us courage." "To fight?" Skylar asked carefully. "To report?" One girl clarified. "We've been keeping records of everything Dylan and Jared do. We're taking it to the new committee." The new committee part of the agreement? A student-faculty panel with actual power to investigate bullying claims, headed by Superintendent Park herself. Inside, the hallways felt different. The invisible hierarchies that had defined Lincoln High were shifting. Athletes still commanded respect, but fear no longer accompanied it. Wealth still talked, but it no longer silenced others. Dylan and Jared stood by their lockers, isolated. Without Garrett, their power had evaporated. When they saw Skylar, both looked away. The predators had become prey, not through violence, but through truth. Sky, Ashley ran up, followed by half the cheerleading squad. Did you see? Coach Madison got approved for the self-defense seminar. She wants you to help teach it. I'm not a teacher. You are now? Megan interrupted. I've got like 30 girls who want to learn that kick. In AP history, Mr. Davidson had rearranged the seating. Garrett's empty desk had been removed entirely, leaving more space for group discussions. When Skylar entered, the class applauded. She blushed, taking her seat quickly. Before we begin, Davidson said, I want to address what happened. For too long, teachers here have turned blind eyes to bullying, afraid of parental power or administrative pressure. That stops now. This classroom is a safe space for all students, regardless of background. The day continued with surreal moments, teachers nodding respectfully, students asking for training tips, even cafeteria staff thanking her for standing up to those boys. But it was Principal Roberts who surprised her most. Miss Wells. He called her to his office during 6th period. I owe you an apology. Skylar sat in the same chair she'd occupied Friday. But the power dynamic had shifted. Sir? I knew what was happening. The complaints about Garrett, Dylan, Jared, they piled up for years. But their families donate, threaten lawsuits, make my job difficult. He looked older, worn down by compromise. I chose the easy path, and students suffered for it. You showed more courage in 30 seconds than I've shown in 15 years. It wasn't courage, Skylar said quietly. It was necessity. He crossed a line. Still, things will be different now. The new policies have real consequences, regardless of who your parents are. He paused. I'm also recommending you for the district's citizenship award. What you did transcended self-defense. You changed this school's culture. That afternoon, the self-defense seminar filled the auxiliary gym. 60 students showed up, girls and boys, freshmen through seniors, united by a desire to feel less helpless. Skylar stood at the front in her training gear, no longer hiding her strength. First lesson, she began, her voice carrying clearly. Fighting is the last resort. Your best defense is awareness, avoidance, and de-escalation. Physical techniques are for when all else fails. But you dropped Garrett with one kick. A sophomore boy called out, after 3 weeks of harassment, multiple witnesses to his escalation. And only when he physically assaulted me. Skylar's tone was serious. I didn't fight because I could. I fought because I had to. There's a difference. She taught them basic show to break grips, create distance, target vulnerable points. But more importantly, she taught them confidence, how to walk with purpose, how to use their voice as a weapon, how to recognize dangerous situations before they escalated. Strength isn't about hurting others, she said, helping a tiny freshman girl practice a wrist release. It's about protecting yourself and those who can't protect themselves. After practice, Ashley approached with news. Garrett's video apology just posted. You need to see this. They gathered around Ashley's phone. Garrett Stone sat in what looked like a therapist's office, his face still showing bruises from his fall. He looked smaller somehow, deflated without his usual arrogance. I want to apologize to Skylar Wells, he began, reading from notes. What I did was assault. I targeted her because of her economic background, disrespected her father's military service, and created a culture of fear at Lincoln High. I was wrong. The apology continued for 3 minute specific, detailed, naming other victims and promising restitution. It felt rehearsed but sincere, like someone finally understanding consequences. My therapist says I used bullying to feel powerful because I felt powerless at home. Garrett continued. That's not an excuse, just an explanation. I'm working to be better. To everyone I hurt, I'm sorry. The video ended with information about the scholarship fund and anti-bullying resources. Comments were disabled, preventing the pile-on that would have inevitably followed. Thoughts? Ashley asked. It's a start, Skylar said. Apologies are words. Change requires action. 3 months later, Lincoln High hosted its first military appreciation assembly. Skylar stood on stage, wearing her father's jacket professionally restored with invisible stitching. The Purple Heart gleamed on her chest, properly mounted. Now, my father fought external enemies, she told the packed auditorium, but sometimes the enemies are internal bullying. Prejudice. The belief that might makes right. We don't need roundhouse kicks to fight those battles. We need courage to speak up. strength to stand together, and wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive. In the audience, Diane Wells wiped away tears. Around her sat other military families, many attending Lincoln High events for the first time. The scholarship fund had already awarded 2 full rides, with more pending. Dylan Cross and Jared King sat in the back, mandated to attend as part of their community service. Both had lost their spots on the football team, their college prospects evaporating with their reputations, but something in their postures suggested learning rather than sulking. Sometimes consequences were the best teachers. Superintendent Park took the stage next. Lincoln High has become a model for anti-bullying initiatives statewide. Applications are up 30%, particularly from military and low-income families who now feel safe sending their children here. This transformation happened because one student refused to be victimized. The assembly concluded with a surprise. The governor appeared on video, announcing Skylar as recipient of the State Youth Courage Award. The scholarship offers she'd worried about, they'd multiplied. Full rides from universities with elite martial arts programs, military academies expressing interest, even international opportunities. But Skylar had already decided State University, close to home, where she could continue teaching self-defense to those who needed it. Her mother needed her nearby, and Lincoln High's transformation was just beginning. After the assembly, a freshman approached nervously. "Miss Wells? I'm Emma. I just transferred here. And some girls are already at Thursday afternoons?" Skylar interrupted gently. "Self-defense seminar. But also, tell me their names. Nobody gets bullied at Lincoln anymore. Not on my watch." As Emma walked away with renewed confidence, Ashley bumped Skylar's shoulder. "Look at you. All protective and stuff. Someone has to be. Your dad would be proud." Skylar touched the Purple Heart. Feeling its weight, he believed in fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "Just took me a while to understand that sometimes fighting doesn't look like combat. Sometimes it looks like teaching. Sometimes it looks like standing up. And sometimes," she smiled, "it looks like a perfectly executed roundhouse kick to a bully's jaw." They walked toward the gym where another self-defense session waited. Behind them, Lincoln High's halls buzzed with a different energy, safer, more inclusive, more just. One kick hadn't just dropped a bully, it had toppled a system, and in Skylar Wells, students found not just a defender, but a teacher. Not just a fighter, but a healer. The girl who'd hidden her strength for 3 weeks had become the woman who'd spend years sharing it. Her father's jacket caught the light as she moved, no longer bearing scars of violence but wearing them like medals. Some things were worth fighting for. Family, honor, the right to exist without fear, and sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest warriors cast the longest shadows. 6 months later, Skylar stood in the doorway of a small martial arts studio in downtown Cedar Rapids. The sign above read, "Wells Warriors, Empowerment Through Discipline." Her mother had co-signed the lease using money from a GoFundMe that had exploded after the incident, raising over $200,000 from supporters worldwide. "You sure about this?" Diane asked, holding a box of framed photos of her father in uniform. Skylar's competition victories. And yes, a screenshot of the famous hallway video with the caption, "Sometimes heroes wear cheerleading uniforms." "Never been more sure of anything," Skylar replied, running her hand over the freshly painted walls. "This isn't about teaching people to fight. It's about teaching them they're worth fighting for." The grand opening drew unexpected visitors. Ashley arrived with half the cheerleading squad. Now, regular students in Skylar's advanced classes. Mr. Davidson brought his daughter, a shy middle schooler who'd been having trouble with bullies. Even Principal Roberts showed up, bringing a check from the school board for equipment. But the surprise came when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Garrett Stone stood there. No longer the swaggering quarterback, but a young man who'd been broken and rebuilt. He wore simple clothes, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The studio went silent. Ashley moved protectively toward Skylar. But Skylar held up a hand. "Garrett," she said simply, "I know I'm not welcome." He started, his voice differentiator, more thoughtful, "But I wanted to give you this in person." He pulled out an envelope, hands trembling slightly. Inside was a check for $25,000. "It's my college fund," he explained at Skylar's questioning. "Look, or was, I'm not going to Duke. I'm taking a gap year, working at the VA hospital full-time. This should go to someone who deserves it. Garrett, please." His voice cracked. I've been in therapy 3 times a week. I've learned things about myself I never wanted to face, how my dad's pressure made me feel worthless, how I turned that into making others feel worthless, how I became everything I hated about him. The room remained frozen, everyone waiting for Skylar's response. I can't undo what I did, Garrett continued, but I can try to make sure the next kid like me gets help before they become a monster. I'm starting a program at the VA Youth Counseling for kids dealing with anger and entitlement issues. My therapist is helping. Skylar studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Thursday nights, she said, I'm starting a class for former bullies who want to change. Accountability through action. You interested? Garrett's eyes widened. You'd let me train here? Not train. Learn. There's a difference. Skylar handed the check back. Keep your money. Donate it to the VA program. But if you're serious about change, show up Thursday. First lesson is free. After that, you earn your place through work. He nodded, speechless, and left quickly. The studio erupted in whispers. You're really going to teach him? Ashley asked, incredulous. My father used to say the hardest battles aren't against enemies, but against who we used to be, Skylar replied. If Garrett's serious about changing, denying him that chance makes me no better than he was. The classes grew. Thursday nights became known as redemption sessions, former bullies learning not just physical discipline but emotional control, empathy, and accountability. Garrett never missed a session, often staying late to clean the studio or help set up for other classes. One evening, 3 months into the program, Skylar found him sitting alone after class, staring at his hands. I threw my first punch when I was 8, he said without preamble. My dad was teaching me to be strong. By 10, I was targeting kids who couldn't fight back. By 15, I was untouchable. I never thought about the damage until you showed me what real strength looked like. Real strength is showing up here every week, Skylar said, sitting beside him, facing who you were, working to be better. Do they ever forgive? The people we hurt? Some do, some don't. That's not the point. Skylar stood, offering him a hand up. The point is becoming someone worthy of forgiveness, whether it comes or not. A year after the incident, Lincoln High invited Skylar back as keynote speaker for their first annual Stand Strong Symposium. She walked those familiar halls, but everything had changed. The trophy case that once held only athletic achievements now included academic honors, community service awards, and a special section dedicated to students who'd shown moral courage. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but for Skylar, the real victory was in the quiet moments after students approaching with their stories, parents asking about classes for their kids, former bullies seeking redemption, and victims finding strength. The girl who'd hidden her warrior spirit had become a woman who taught others to find theirs, not through violence, but through discipline, not through domination, but through empowerment, not through hiding, but through standing tall. Her father's jacket bore invisible scars now, mended so expertly that only she knew where it had been torn. Like her, like all of them, broken once, but stronger for the mending. Some fights end with knockouts. The best ones end with transformation. And in Cedar Rapids, in a small studio where warriors were made and redeemed, Skylar Wells continued her father's fight on student. One bully, one moment of courage at a time. The roundhouse kick that silenced a hallway had become the voice that empowered a generation.